Jake sat in his sleek corner office, overlooking Manhattan, sipping his imported espresso as he admired his reflection in the glass. Success had come swiftly to him, faster than he'd ever imagined when he first started flipping small properties with Emily cheering him on. Now he had it all: wealth, power, and the admiration of everyone in his circle. Everyone, that is, except himself. At home, Emily prepared dinner in their modest suburban kitchen. Hush, she was the same Emily who had once worked double shifts as a teacher to support Jake's dreams. Her laughter still lit up a room, and her kindness remained unmatched. But in Jake's eyes, she seemed out of place in the world he now occupied. Her simple clothes and unassuming demeanor stood in stark contrast to the glamorous lifestyle Jake had embraced. The women at his corporate events dripped in designer labels and diamonds, while Emily preferred her comfortable flats and warm cardigans. "She doesn't fit in," Jake muttered to himself one evening after another dinner party where Emily had politely declined to join. "She's holding me back." The cracks in their marriage began to widen. Jake worked longer hours and made excuses to miss family dinners, claiming his clients demanded his time. Emily noticed the change: his distracted glances, the quick kisses that felt more like habits than affection, the way he always seemed to have his phone in hand. One evening, as Emily set the table for dinner, Jake arrived home late. She greeted him warmly, but he barely looked up from his phone. "You should have eaten without me," he said absently, scrolling through an email. Emily hesitated. "Jake, is everything okay? You've been so distant lately." "I'm just busy," he replied curtly, avoiding her gaze. "You wouldn't understand how much pressure I'm under." Her heart sank, but she pressed on. "I do understand, Jake. I've been with you every step of the way. I miss us." Jake sighed, frustrated. "I can't have this conversation right now, Emily. I have too much on my plate." That night, as Emily lay awake in bed, staring at the ceiling, Jake scrolled through his social media feed, envying the curated lives of his wealthy colleagues. Their glamorous spouses seemed like trophies, symbols of their success. He couldn't help but feel that Emily no longer matched the image he wanted to project. In his quest for more money, more power, more status, Jake failed to notice the woman who had been his rock. To him, Emily had become a hindrance, a relic of his past he was trying to outgrow. The foundation of their marriage, once solid and unshakable, now showed its first cracks. And as Jake drifted further from Emily, those cracks threatened to become a chasm. She turned and looked out at the shore. He turned and watched the lounge. Jake's days grew busier, his nights longer, and his ambition sharper. The cracks in his marriage widened as he surrounded himself with people who mirrored the life he aspired to lead: polished, confident, and glamorous. One of these people was Vanessa, a vivacious socialite and consultant for high-end real estate clients. Jake met Vanessa at a high-profitable networking event hosted by one of his wealthiest clients. She was impossible to ignore. Her laughter carried across the room, her sleek dress caught every glimmer of light, and her confidence seemed effortless. "Jake Harris," she said, extending a perfectly manicured hand. "I've heard a lot about you." Jake smiled, charmed by her boldness. "All good things, I hope." Vanessa tilted her head, her eyes sparkling. "Of course. You're the talk of the real estate world. But I have to admit, I was curious to meet the man behind the name." Their conversation flowed easily, her charm intoxicating. Vanessa had a way of making Jake feel seen, admired, and, most importantly, powerful. She spoke his language: business, luxury, ambition, and Jake was hooked. Emily noticed the change in Jake after that night. He began coming home even later, often brushing off her attempts to connect. "What was the event?" she asked one evening as Jake tossed his suit jacket over a chair. "Fine. Productive," he replied curtly, avoiding her eyes. Emily tried to ignore the pang in her chest. "You've been so busy lately. Maybe we could take a weekend away, just the two of us." Jake waved her off. "Emily, I don't have time for that. These deals don't close themselves." She forced a smile, but her heart ached. Jake's words felt more like walls than excuses, shutting her out of his life. Jake and Vanessa's interactions became more frequent. At first, It was casual, business meetings that lingered over drinks, texts that strayed beyond professional topics. Vanessa fed Jake's ego, praising his success and subtly criticizing those who couldn't keep up with him. "You deserve someone who understands the world you're building," she said one evening over cocktails. Jake didn't respond immediately, but her words planted a seed. He began to see Vanessa as a reflection of the life he wanted, a partner who could dazzle at galas, charm clients, and elevate his image. Their relationship soon crossed the line. Jake rationalized it to himself, thinking, "Emily wouldn't understand this side of me. She doesn't belong in this world." Meanwhile, Emily noticed the subtle signs of Jake's betrayal, the sudden secrecy with his phone, the cologne lingering on his shirts when he came home late, and the distant look in his eyes when they shared a meal. One evening, as Jake typed furiously on his laptop, Emily approached him with a hopeful smile. "Jake, is there something you want to talk about?" He glanced up, irritation flashing across his face. "Emily, I'm busy. Can we not do this right now?" Emily's smile faltered, but she nodded. "Sure. Let me know if you need anything." As she walked away, Jake felt a twinge of guilt, but it was fleeting. In his mind, Emily had become a relic of his past, while Vanessa represented his future. Jake's double life deepened. Vanessa became his partner at high-profile events, where she dazzled clients and colleagues alike. Jake reveled in the admiration she brought him, convinced he was crafting the perfect image. But what Jake didn't realize was that Emily, though quiet and reserved, was far more perceptive than he gave her credit for. Behind her kind smile, she began piecing together the truth. Jake's affair with Vanessa blossomed into a carefully curated secret, one that he convinced himself was harmless. In his mind, he wasn't abandoning Emily. He was simply creating a separate space for himself to thrive. He believed he was too clever to be caught, weaving lies with ease and confidence. Vanessa became a staple in Jake's professional life. She joined him at high-profile dinners, dazzled his clients, and played the role of the perfect partner. Her sharp wit and glamorous presence made Jake feel invincible. "You're unstoppable, Jake," Vanessa would say after an event, running her fingers down his arm. "With me by your side, there's nothing you can't achieve." Jake basked in her flattery, convinced she was a reflection of his success. Meanwhile, Emily remained at home, growing increasingly suspicious of Jake's late nights and vague excuses. Emily began noticing the little things that didn't add up. Jake's phone, once left carelessly on the counter, was now always locked and face down. His suits carried faint traces of unfamiliar perfume, and he began avoiding her questions with curt, dismissive responses. One evening, while cleaning out Jake's closet, Emily found a receipt for an expensive dinner for two at a high-end restaurant. The date matched a night Jake had claimed to be working late. Her hands trembled as she stared at the slip of paper, her mind racing with possibilities. Emily decided not to confront Jake yet. Instead, she quietly began piecing together the puzzle, watching and waiting for the right moment. In Jake's mind, he had done nothing wrong. He rationalized his actions, telling himself that Emily couldn't understand the pressures of his world. "She's happy in her little bubble," he thought. "She doesn't need to know about this." Vanessa, on the other hand, fed his ego and made him feel like the king of his domain. Together they attended galas and business meetings, where Vanessa's charm captivated everyone around them. Jake felt untouchable, confident that his double life was perfectly orchestrated. While Jake sank deeper into his affair, Emily found solace in her work. As a teacher, she poured herself into helping her students and volunteering for community projects. Her compassion and dedication earned her the respect of her peers and the admiration of many in the local community. Despite her growing suspicion of Jake's infidelity, Emily remained composed. She refused to let his betrayal consume her, focusing instead on building something meaningful outside of her marriage. One night, Jake came home late, his tie loosened and his eyes tired. Emily waited for him in the living room, her expression calm but watchful. "How was your meeting?" she asked, her voice steady. Jake hesitated for a moment before replying, "It went well. Just another late night at the office." Emily nodded, hiding the hurt that threatened to surface. "I'm glad to hear that," she said softly, her eyes lingering on him a moment longer than usual. Jake quickly excused himself, retreating to the bedroom. As he closed the door behind him, Emily sat back on the couch, her suspicions solidified. Jake's life seemed perfect on the surface. A thriving career, a glamorous companion, and the respect of his peers. But beneath the facade, the cracks in his double life were beginning to show. Unbeknownst to Jake, Emily was not the naive, oblivious wife he believed her to be. While he reveled in his deception, Emily quietly prepared for the storm she knew was coming. Jake's career reached a pivotal moment when an invitation arrived for an exclusive dinner with foreign investors. This wasn't just any meeting. This was the opportunity to transform his business into a global powerhouse. Millions of dollars and international recognition were at stake. Jake's assistant explained the importance of the evening. "These investors aren't just about numbers, Jake. They value authenticity, trust, and family. They want to know who you are, not just what you do." Jake nodded, barely listening. His mind flashed briefly to Emily. Her warmth and sincerity could appeal to the investors, but then he thought of Vanessa. Her sophistication, beauty, and ability to command a room. Emily wouldn't fit in here. Jake muttered as he discarded the idea of bringing his wife. Vanessa is the right choice for this. Back home, Emily quietly observed Jake's behavior, the secrecy, the unexplained late nights, and his reluctance to meet her eyes when he spoke. It was all too familiar now. She overheard a phone call where Jake excitedly described Vanessa as his +1 for the dinner. Emily felt the sting of betrayal, but chose not to confront Jake directly. Instead, she reached out to her contacts in the education and nonprofit world. One of her colleagues, familiar with her impactful work, happened to have connections with the investors' spouses. "You should come to the dinner," the colleague said. "Your work aligns perfectly with their mission. I'll make sure you're on the guest list." Emily accepted the invitation with quiet determination, ready to face whatever the evening held. Jake arrived at the grand ballroom with Vanessa on his arm, the two of them exuding the perfect image of wealth and power. Vanessa dazzled in a sleek red gown that turned heads, and Jake couldn't help but feel a surge of pride as she charmed the investors and their guests. Throughout the evening, Jake introduced Vanessa as his partner, conveniently leaving out any mention of Emily. The investors, impressed by Vanessa's polished demeanor, exchanged polite pleasantries, but remained reserved, waiting to see more. Just as dinner was being served, a ripple of murmurs spread across the room. Heads turned toward the entrance as Emily walked in, wearing an understated but elegant navy mill dress. Her calm, confident demeanor contrasted sharply with the glitz and glamour of the event, but she held her head high. Jake froze mid-sentence, his face draining of color as he watched the exchange. Vanessa leaned in and whispered, "Who's she?" Jake hesitated, then muttered, "My wife." Vanessa's eyes widened in disbelief. "Your wife?" she hissed, her voice sharp. But before Jake could respond, the lead investor clinked his glass, calling the room to attention. Watch out for part 2. What do you think Emily set out to do? Please, like, comment, and subscribe. Thanks for watching.